For centuries, philosophers, thinkers, and psychologists have praised self-knowledge as one of the greatest pursuits of the human spirit. From Socrates' timeless call to know thyself, to Freud's pioneering theories of the unconscious, from Carl Jung's deep exploration of the psyche, to Foucault's reflections on identity and power, humanity has always placed the journey inward at the center of personal growth, freedom, and authenticity. But what almost no one dares to admit, and what Carl Jung understood more deeply than most, is that this journey inward, if taken too far, hides a subtle and devastating danger. It's the danger of going so deep into yourself that the very light you seek turns into darkness. It's the moment when introspection, meant to illuminate, begins to blind, when self-knowledge, meant to liberate, becomes a cage, when the quest to understand yourself ends not in clarity, but in confusion. Jung learned this firsthand. After breaking away from Sigmund Freud, his mentor, collaborator, and eventually rival, he plunged into an intense period of self-analysis unlike anything most people could imagine. It was a journey into the depths of his unconscious, one that shook the foundations of his sanity and forced him to confront the most primal forces of the human soul. This was not an intellectual exercise. It was a lived experience, raw, consuming, and at times terrifying. In his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung writes about moments when he felt he might lose his mind while facing the archetypal images that rose from the depths of his unconscious. He doesn't romanticize this descent. He doesn't describe it as a beautiful spiritual retreat. Instead, he warns, the unconscious is not a peaceful inner garden where we pick flowers of wisdom. It's a dense, dark forest, alive, unpredictable, and capable of swallowing anyone who enters without a map. And this is where the real danger lies. Because if the journey inward is not balanced with a life lived outward, if we dive too deep without keeping at least one foot on the ground of reality, we risk losing ourselves entirely. You can see this even today in the lives of ordinary people. Take, for example, someone in New York who begins therapy to understand themselves better. Their childhood, their fears, their patterns. At first, the process is liberating. They uncover hidden motivations, make sense of old wounds, and feel more in control of their emotions. But slowly, subtly, something changes. They begin to spend more time analyzing their thoughts than living them. They obsess over every emotion, every dream, every word they say. They start withdrawing from friends because social interactions feel too shallow. They no longer watch movies or go out spontaneously because everything must have a deeper meaning. What began as a path to self-awareness becomes a spiral of overthinking. This is exactly what Jung warned about. There's a point where the inward gaze stops connecting you to life and starts cutting you off from it. A point where you live more in symbols than in relationships, more in concepts than in feelings, more in analysis than in experience. People in this state often believe they are evolving, but they are actually isolating themselves. They may feel superior, more conscious than others, yet fail to see that they are simply trapped in their own labyrinth of thoughts. And when they try to return to the world, they discover they've forgotten how to connect. Everything around them seems shallow compared to the vast, dramatic landscapes of their own psyche. Jung saw this not just in his patients but in himself. And that's why he offered a warning that is just as urgent today as it was a century ago. Self-knowledge must always be accompanied by humility, balance, and vigilance. Because the unconscious is not neutral. It's alive. It has its own intentions, rhythms, and resistance to arrogance. When we approach it with too much confidence or obsession, it can consume us. This is why Jung's work is not just a call to know yourself. It's a call to know yourself wisely. To recognize that introspection is not about dissecting every hidden corner of your psyche, but about learning how to live with what you find. It's not about mastering the soul, but about coexisting with it. This distinction may sound subtle, but it changes everything. Many people, especially in modern Western culture, confuse self-discovery with self-absorption. The culture of personality tests, therapy buzzwords, and online shadow work often turns the inner journey into a performance rather than a transformation. People collect psychological labels as if they were badges of honor. I'm an INFJ, I'm an empath, I'm trauma-informed. These labels can help, but they can also become prisons. They offer the illusion of understanding while silently narrowing the possibilities of who we might become. In Silicon Valley, for instance, many ambitious professionals dive deep into personal development workshops, exploring their archetypes, attachment styles, and childhood wounds. But some become so obsessed with introspection that they lose touch with life itself. They analyze their relationships to death, intellectualize every conflict, and avoid taking risks because they haven't fully healed yet. Their desire to grow becomes a sophisticated way of hiding from the messiness of reality. Jung called this danger ego inflation. The moment when the ego, upon touching the powerful contents of the unconscious, begins to see itself as special, enlightened, or superior. It's when we stop being explorers of our inner world and start believing we are prophets of universal truth. And yet, the deeper lesson Jung left us is this: the purpose of self-knowledge is not to build a shrine to our own complexity. It's to live more authentically, more consciously, more compassionately. It's to navigate life with greater awareness without losing the ability to live it fully. Sometimes, true maturity is not about understanding everything about who we are, but about accepting that there are parts of us that will always remain mysterious. Life is not just about consciousness. It also demands spontaneity, surrender, and connection. Those who know themselves too well, Jung warned, may forget how to live. The deeper we go into the landscape of the psyche, the more we begin to uncover a hidden danger, one that often sneaks up silently and disguises itself as growth. At first, self-reflection feels empowering. We discover hidden patterns, understand our wounds, and develop language to articulate the complexities within us. But somewhere along the way, a subtle shift begins to happen. The very act of seeking to understand ourselves starts to change us, and not always for the better. From this point forward, the journey is no longer just about awareness. It's about confronting the most dangerous illusion on the path of self-knowledge, the inflation of the ego. And if you feel drawn to explore these deeper dimensions of the inner world, not as abstract ideas, but as living truths, then I invite you to subscribe. This space is not about quick fixes or surface-level advice. It's a quiet journey inward, a space to question, to reflect, and to grow with presence and depth. Carl Jung called this phenomenon ego inflation, and he described it as a psychological trap that can consume even the most sincere seekers. It doesn't happen in a flash. It unfolds slowly, layer by layer, as we come into contact with the profound forces that reside in the unconscious. Archetypes, symbols, primordial energies. They are powerful, and when we meet them, we often don't realize how easily the ego begins to identify with them. We stop seeing ourselves as explorers and start believing we are chosen, special, perhaps even enlightened. Consider someone who spent months in therapy or buried themselves in books about psychology and spirituality. Gradually, they begin to speak in psychological terms. That's my shadow projection. This is an unconscious complex. That's archetypal energy. What once was a quest for understanding transforms into a performance. They are no longer living their emotions, they're explaining them. They are no longer present in relationships, they're diagnosing them. To outsiders, They might appear wise and insightful, but internally, they've been seduced by their own mind. This is not rare. Across self-help circles in America, from Los Angeles meditation retreats to online coaching communities, many people who began their journeys seeking healing eventually crown themselves as guides, mentors, or healers. They speak as if they hold universal truth, while their own inner wounds remain unresolved. This is ego inflation at work. It doesn't make us stronger, it makes us cling to a more polished illusion of ourselves. Jung warned that this state is as dangerous as repressing the unconscious itself, because once the ego inflates, it constructs a persona, the wise sage, the enlightened teacher, the spiritual leader. Yet behind that impressive mask often lies a fragile, anxious self, desperate for validation. Inflation is not real strength. It's compensation, a sparkling disguise covering an inner emptiness. And as this illusion grows, something tragic begins to happen. Authenticity fades. We stop living and start performing. We stop listening and start lecturing. We stop connecting and start explaining. And the more we act out this role, the further we drift from the raw, unfiltered truth of who we are. We see it all around us. People who speak beautifully about compassion but cannot listen with patience. People who understand trauma in exquisite detail but cannot apologize sincerely. People who can name every archetype in the psyche yet cannot accept their own vulnerability. Knowledge becomes a shield, and the search for truth becomes a wall between us and the very life we seek to understand. The most dangerous part of all is that we rarely recognize when we're caught in this trap. On the surface, it feels like growth. It feels like awakening. But beneath it, we're living inside a carefully constructed illusion, one built not by truth, but by the ego's hunger to feel significant. Jung's message is timeless. Self-knowledge must never lift our feet off the ground. The deeper we look inward, the more firmly we must stay connected to the reality of living, to the world, to relationships, to the unpredictability of life itself. True understanding is not measured by how much we know about ourselves. It's measured by how much more human, humble, and real we become because of it. So, pause here just for a moment and reflect deeply. Have you ever felt like you knew everything about yourself, yet nothing in your life truly changed? If, right now, you feel ready to live with more honesty, more courage, and more authenticity, then write a simple affirmation below. It could be something as straightforward as, "I choose to live my truth." As the ego begins to inflate and the search for understanding turns inward, another subtle transformation starts to take place, one that is even harder to notice and even more painful to escape. Bit by bit, we begin to drift away from the world. At first, it seems like a conscious choice. We spend more time alone. We value silence. We protect our energy. But beneath the surface, something else is happening. We're not simply seeking solitude. We're slipping into isolation. This is one of the most dangerous consequences of excessive introspection. The gradual erosion of our capacity to connect with other human beings. We don't cut ties all at once. Instead, we quietly begin to lose interest. Conversations that once felt lively now seem shallow. Shared laughter begins to sound trivial. Relationships that used to matter deeply start to feel like distractions from the real work going on inside our minds. And so, we retreat, deeper and deeper into ourselves, believing that what we're doing is noble, even necessary. Before we explore this more deeply, I want to gently remind you, if this journey resonates with something inside you, if you're seeking not just knowledge, but transformation, then consider subscribing. Each video in this space is an invitation to go deeper, to question the unconscious patterns that shape our lives, and to walk this path of self-discovery with awareness and courage. Carl Jung observed this phenomenon often in his patients and in himself. Those who dive too deeply into introspection sometimes develop what he called pathological self-absorption, a kind of mirror prison where everything becomes a reflection of the self. Every conversation becomes an analysis. Every relationship becomes a case study. Every emotion becomes a symbol to be decoded. Life ceases to be lived spontaneously. It becomes a psychological experiment. At first, this doesn't feel like suffering. In fact, it can feel peaceful, even empowering. Many people in this state describe their isolation as a choice. They say they finally feel free from the noise of the world. But over time, this self-chosen solitude begins to show its true face. What once felt like freedom slowly turns into emptiness. The absence of real relationships starts to erode the soul. Without genuine connection, without conflict, affection, laughter, and even ordinary, messy human interactions, our inner world becomes sterile. Imagine a person who spends years analyzing every part of their inner life, but gradually loses the ability to be present with another person. They might sit across from a friend, nodding politely, but inside they're dissecting every word, every reaction, every possible hidden meaning. They might fall in love, but instead of surrendering to the raw vulnerability of it, they observe their feelings from a distance, trying to understand their attachment style or decode their shadow projection. Life is no longer lived, it's interpreted. The more they do this, the less spontaneous they become. Joy starts to feel unfamiliar. Humor feels forced. Creativity dries up. Even simple acts, like reaching out to hug someone or laughing uncontrollably, become difficult because every impulse is now filtered through layers of analysis. What was once natural must now be understood before it is expressed. Jung warned that this excessive focus on self-observation can eventually paralyze the psyche. The person becomes an eternal spectator of their own life, watching, questioning, evaluating, but rarely participating. And in this state, something essential begins to wither. The ability to trust one's own spontaneity. The ability to feel before thinking. The ability to let life move through us without needing to control or explain it. In modern life, this problem is everywhere. Many people who embark on a journey of self-discovery unintentionally build walls around themselves. They speak about boundaries and energy protection, but sometimes these are just excuses to avoid vulnerability. They say they're working on themselves, but in truth, they're hiding. And the longer they hide, the more they fear the unpredictable, chaotic, beautifully messy nature of human connection. This is why Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming who you are, cannot happen in isolation. It requires relationship, it requires confrontation with the other, with difference, with challenge, with discomfort, because it is in those encounters that the unconscious truly reveals itself. It's in the messy reality of relationships that our shadows surface, our complexes activate, and our deepest wounds demand healing. Without that, we become trapped in a sterile, self-referential loop. And yet, there is still hope. Always. The antidote to isolation is not more self-analysis, but genuine participation. It's allowing ourselves to be messy and imperfect. It's stepping into conversations without needing to control how they unfold. It's saying, I love you, even if we don't fully understand why. It's trusting that connection itself can be a teacher, perhaps even a deeper one than introspection ever could. Because the real danger is not that we might fail to understand ourselves. The real danger is that in trying so hard to understand, we might forget how to love. Reflect on this deeply. Have you ever hidden behind your own self-awareness, analyzing life so much that you stopped living it? If you're ready to step back into connection, to meet life with open hands instead of folded arms, write a simple affirmation below. It could be as honest as, I choose connection over isolation. Once isolation has taken hold and we've become accustomed to living within the narrow borders of our inner world, another, even more insidious state begins to emerge. It happens quietly, almost invisibly, and yet it can consume a life entirely. This is the point where the mind, once a tool for awareness, becomes a relentless machine of analysis. Every thought, every feeling, every impulse is dissected, examined, questioned for and yonder. And in that endless dissection, something vital slips away. We lose the ability to live. At first glance, this might appear as maturity. The ability to reflect deeply is often celebrated as a sign of wisdom and evolution, a mark of consciousness. But Jung warned that there is a fine, almost invisible line between healthy self-awareness and obsessive self-examination. And when that line is crossed, introspection stops being a doorway to understanding and becomes a barrier that separates us from life itself. A person trapped in this state resembles someone standing behind a thick pane of glass, watching life unfold, but never truly touching it. They do not live. They monitor their living. Every emotion is scrutinized until it loses its natural force. Every desire is interrogated until it evaporates. Every decision is questioned until the courage to act disappears. And so, nothing happens. Imagine someone standing before a new opportunity at Jidbar. Chop shadow piece of her faith, a hop or phobia from mine. A chance to change their life. But instead of taking a step forward, their mind floods with questions. Is this choice coming from my ego or my true self? Is this feeling authentic or a trauma response? Am I repeating an unconscious pattern? One question leads to another, and time quietly slips away. Life doesn't stop because they don't know what to do. It stops because they think too much. In modern society, especially in places like the United States, this state is incredibly common. A young person might read dozens of books on psychology, healing, and self-development, only to become paralyzed by what they've learned. They know too much about attachment styles, childhood wounds, and defense mechanisms to trust their instincts anymore. They feel they must understand everything before making a decision. But as Jung often reminded us, the human soul is inexhaustible. And if you wait until you understand it all, you will never begin. This paralysis doesn't just happen in the mind. It spreads into every corner of life. The body becomes hesitant. Relationships stagnate. Dreams freeze. People spend so much time thinking about how they should feel that they forget how to actually feel. They question their motives so thoroughly that they can't make even the simplest decisions. They analyze their reactions so deeply that they no longer know if they are authentic or rehearsed. Life ceases to be a flow. It becomes a maze. Jung once compared this state to a lamp burning in a locked room, always illuminating the same four walls, never shining on anything new. When the mind is consumed by analysis without action, it begins to devour itself. Thought feeds on thought. Reflection generates more reflection. And instead of freeing us, awareness becomes a prison. We become trapped by the very light we sought for liberation. The irony is that most people don't fall into this state because they fear failure. They fall into it because they long to live deeply. They want to act from their authentic self, to make conscious choices, to avoid repeating old patterns. But that sincere desire is hijacked by an unconscious perfectionism that demands certainty before every step. Simplicity becomes suspicious. Spontaneity is dismissed. And in the process, they lose the most precious thing of all, the raw, unpredictable flow of life. The cruelest consequence of this over-analysis is the erosion of self-trust. Every emotion becomes a question. Is this feeling real? Is this desire coming from my ego or my soul? Is this impulse authentic or compensatory? And in the labyrinth of endless questioning, people drift further and further from direct experience. They feel hunger, but don't eat. They feel the urge to embrace someone, but hesitate. They have ideas, but never act on them. The world becomes an abstraction, no longer a place to inhabit, just a concept to think about. Jung believed that the psyche needs movement, flow, and action. When it becomes rigid, turned entirely inward, it begins to self-destruct. The soul does not only want to be understood, it wants to be lived. And for that, courage is required. Courage to fail. Courage to try. Courage to act without knowing all the answers. Because it is in action, not analysis, that life truly transforms. And perhaps this is the paradox at the heart of being human. Not everything within us is meant to be understood. Some feelings are meant to be felt. Some choices are meant to be made. Some steps are meant to be taken before we fully know where they lead. Sometimes, the greatest wisdom lies in accepting that we don't need to understand everything to begin living. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you truly living? Or are you just preparing to live? Are you feeling your life? Or are you just analyzing it? If today you feel ready to step out of the maze of overthinking and start living with courage, write a simple affirmation below. It could be something as direct as, I choose action over endless thought. In the end, all of this, the inflation of the ego, the isolation from others, the paralysis of overthinking, points toward a deeper truth that Carl Jung understood better than most. Self-knowledge is not the destination of life. It is only a tool for living it. It is one of the most powerful tools we have, yes, but still just a tool. Its purpose is not to explain every nuance of who we are. Its purpose is to help us step more fully into the human experience, to love more deeply, to create more freely, to suffer more consciously, to live more courageously. And if you've walked with me through this journey, if you've felt these ideas resonate somewhere deep inside, I want to gently invite you one last time to subscribe. This space exists for those who seek more than surface-level advice. It's for those who want to dive beneath appearances and walk into the deeper waters of the psyche, where transformation begins not with answers, but with questions, not with certainty, but with courage. The truth is, many people mistake the journey inward for the goal itself. They dive into therapy, shadow work, archetypal studies, and introspection, believing that the aim is to fully understand themselves, as if there were a finish line to the project of self-awareness. But Jung reminds us, there isn't. You will never complete the task of knowing yourself because you are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a living, evolving process. Knowing yourself is not an ending. It's the beginning. What truly matters is what you do with that knowledge once you have it. Think about how often we get stuck here. People know everything about their trauma but still can't say, I'm sorry. They can explain their attachment style perfectly, but still don't know how to hold space for another person's pain. They can list their archetypes and name every part of their psyche, but have forgotten how to laugh at themselves, how to play, how to make mistakes. This is the danger of turning self-knowledge into a cage. We become experts on our inner world, but strangers to the outer one. Jung's message was radically simple. Life is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be lived. And living is messy. It is unpredictable. It is full of contradictions, mistakes, and moments we cannot explain. But it is precisely in those moments, when we act without certainty, love without guarantees, and surrender without control, that we grow into the fullness of who we are meant to become. Wisdom is not measured by how many psychological concepts we can recite. It's measured by how we show up in the world when things fall apart. It's measured by how we treat others when we're angry, how we hold ourselves when we're lost, how we respond to love when it scares us. That is where individuation, Jung's term for becoming our true self, actually happens. Not in books, not in theories, but in the raw, unfiltered moments of living. So perhaps the real invitation is this: stop trying to master yourself, and instead, learn to live with yourself. Stop trying to control every part of your inner world, and instead, build the courage to step into the unknown with open hands. Because the parts of us we cannot understand are not flaws. They are mysteries. And mystery is not something to be solved. It is something to be honored. If there's one lesson this entire journey leaves us with, it's this: know yourself, but do not lose yourself in knowing. Use self-knowledge as a bridge, not as a home. Use it to connect deeper, not to withdraw. Use it to act more boldly, not to retreat. Because in the end, knowing yourself is just the first step. The rest, the real, beautiful, terrifying, breathtaking rest, is life. And now, I want to leave you with one final reflection. Are you ready to stop observing your life from a distance and start truly living it? If you are, let this be the first step. Write a simple affirmation below, something like, "I choose to live fully," or "I am ready to step into life." Let those words be more than just a comment. Let them be a promise to yourself. May each of us have the courage to step out of the labyrinth of overthinking and live a life that is honest, profound, and full of love. And may you, day by day, come closer to the most complete and authentic version of yourself within.